And we are live. Hail the Barbarian Horde. I'm Joe. So, yeah, I decided we should have ourselves a nice little stream, as I've not done a solo stream in a little bit. So, here we go. I'm going to just move to emphasize one thing. Now, I did have to get my hands on a PDF copy of The Hour of the Dragon. This in spite of the fact that I've got several other copies around here somewhere. And I've got my French edition right here. And I don't know where I put... Oh, right there is my physical copy. So we've got several copies here that I'm well armed with. And I want to make sure that we focus on the opening text, the opening scrawl, and analyze and just have a bit of fun here. And hopefully this will also be a good recap for a bit of the novel overall before the next Dragon Hour stream. And the idea here is to at least kind of treat Hour of the Dragon with the same attention and respect that we've treated Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion with. And because of a upcoming set of videos and whatnot, we are going to have to be doing more reading of Tolkien. So hopefully that'll mean fresh Tolkien content. So yay for that. And wow, that hot chocolate does not taste good. It just tastes like stale hot water. So yeah, here we go. Now I'm going to share screen. Now let's see. I would actually prefer to, let's see, I wonder if I can't full screen layout this. All right, good. So I'm off screen. So here we are. The lion banner sways and falls in the horror-haunted gloom. A scarlet dragon rustles by, borne on winds of doom. In heaps the shining horsemen lie, where the thrusting lances break, and deep in the haunted mountains the lost black gods awake. Dead hands grope in the shadows, the stars turn pale with fright, for this is the dragon's hour, the triumph of fear and night. Now, let's just quickly break this down. Lion Banner, this is, as any true blue Howard fan knows, is the banner of Conan. The lion is his totem animal of sorts, with Conan often equated with it. Now, traditionally, lions were, at least thanks to Scotland, were a royal animal. Now, I know there's the view that England had them as a royal animal. They did eventually, but at first it was more a leopard. But the truth of the matter is, the leopard on the royal banners of England actually always looked more like a lion. As for the Scots, they had a really resplendent lion as the royal symbol from almost the word go. Now, that said, Conan is equated with the lion, a very regal symbol, as said, and falls in the horror-haunted gloom. This is just beautiful poetry, because this is just, as said, a poem. A scarlet dragon. I believe Wales has as a symbol a scarlet dragon. But what's more is a dragon was often associated with the devil. Now, I think dragons are cool, and they are, but let's be real here. Howard is, I think, going more for a demonic set of imagery here. And the idea is to kind of also attach symbolism here. Dragons were often symbols of royalty, of monarchy. But in the West, they were often associated with wickedness and evil. Because, it's a dragon that St. George has to slay in order to rescue Lady Fair. That being said, in heaps the Shining Horseman lie. Shining Horseman is obviously a reference to the Knights of Aquilonia. And the Knights of Aquilonia are inspired, I think, by the Chevalier and Paladins of Arthuriana, but also from Charlemagne's court and the just horsemen, knights of medieval Europe, such as France, where the thrusting lances break. So obviously their weapon of choice. Basically, the idea is the knighthood has been broken to some extent. And deep in the haunted mountains, the lost black gods awake. So the lost black gods here is a reference to the old ones, such as Set and others that I don't know as much about because I'm not as well versed in the Lovecraftian side of this legendarium. I've not fully interacted with those stories yet. I do plan to, but I've not yet touched on Howard's old one style stories. And I've never even read any Lovecraft. When I did try once, I didn't really enjoy it. But on the other hand, I find that the idea of elder gods and cosmic horror is not my cup of tea. But on the other hand, I'm sure that there's a good reason why Lovecraft is so beloved, as I think he was a fine gentleman towards Howard. And I plan to start reading the Lovecraft and Howard letters for an Instagram podcast and maybe over on Storyfire. So hopefully this is something I'm going to overcome, and I'm going to get to learn more about Lovecraft. And the only reason hot chocolate. The only reason I kind of praise Lovecraft is that I know that he was a very, very kind guy towards Howard's father after Howard lost his life. Anyways, the idea here would be, I think that the black gods have been asleep, at least in regards to, insofar as their followers are concerned. And of course, dead hands grope in the shadows. The stars turn pale with fright, which that's just great imagery. Just the stars themselves are afraid. But I almost get the image of a starry eclipse where all the stars are winking out in a way, and all you have is darkness above, for a very chilling image there. For this is the dragon's hour, the triumph of fear and night. As said, here Howard is relying on the more devilish, demonic interpretation of dragons, so that the idea of the dragon's hour is a bit of the devil's hour. And what you have is, in all honesty, a fantastic work in poetic mood setting. What I mean is he's using poetry to set the mood very particularly and very perfectly. I very much love this. That said, let me just click here. Ooh, I can't. Okay. I am very much confused. And okay, there. O sleeper, awake. Now, we know the sleeper is Xaltotun. So he must awaken. And okay, seems I had a bit of a internet issue there. And I don't seem to have anyone in the chat, sadly. So I'm all alone. Oh, no, wait, someone just jumped onto the Brothers Hiborian. Welcome, welcome. But anyways, oh, and before I continue, the idea with this, Jets just joined me, but the idea here is that bear in mind that Xaltotun awakens at the start of the story, unleashes a massive plague, what seems to be a black plague of sorts, to wipe out a royal family so that Tarascus could claim the throne. And from there, the conspirators, I'll call them, or the Nemedian alliance beneath Xaltotun, launch a war against Conan, capture him. Conan escapes. And from there, Conan embarks on the quest for the heart of Ahriman, at which point he will end up tracking it down in Stygia, namely in an old pyramid, I believe, or at least a temple. And it is there that one of Fafamon's rivals ends up deciding to awaken one of the long dead ancient sorcerers of, or priests of, Stygia, in the hopes to begin awakening an undead army to revolt against Fafamon. This is the story thus far. So without further ado, let's continue with this hardcore analysis. Oh, and we have Gola. Hi, just got here. I'm at work. Still on my reread here. Conan just snuck into his kingdom with the robe and eye patch. Yeah, that's a great part of this book. I really love that part. That part of the story is one that I find there is such a great reference there to Norse mythology, as it's setting Conan into the Othin role, that is to say, king of the Aesir, the Norse gods. So Howard was very much doing a great reference to, honestly, some of the greatest medieval literature to ever come out, the Norse sagas. And that said, the opening poem of the Lion Banner bears with it more references to medieval symbolism and to Christianity, so that it's a marked contrast to this reference to Othin. And this is something that, like Howard and Tolkien, like Tolkien, everyone knows about his love for the Norse and his constant references to Norse mythology. Gandalf himself is in a way a Othin type character. And for Conan to take up such a role, or at least such imagery himself, is something that lets us know, like, I think it bears reminding ourselves that Howard was just as much of a fanboy of the Norse sagas. Gola was thinking the same thing. Odin appearing as a one-eyed man. Yep. Yeah, and like this is something that I honestly love about Howard. And now I'm just going to quickly look through my French edition for here. I'm going to actually just stop screen. I'm just going to temporarily search through here and share this this reference, and I'm just going to scroll back up on my PDF copy because I want to compare and contrast. La bannière au lion vacille. s'enfonce dans l'horreur des ténèbres. Un dragon écarlate frémit et s'anime, porté par les vents du destin, dans leur armure étincelante. Les chevaliers gisent ensemble, transpercés par les lances meurtrières, au plus profond des montagnes hantées. Des dieux noirs et oubliés s'éveillent. Les mains mortes tâtonnent dans l'obscurité. Les étoiles pâlissent de peur, car c'est là l'heure du dragon, le triomphe de la peur et de la nuit. Now, that's the French version. And it's word for word mostly the same, except it doesn't rhyme quite so well as Howard's edition. Now, let me see. Now, I don't have a French PDF copy. I wish I did. Maybe I'll have to get one for next time. And the thing is, what's interesting is that in the French edition, un dragon écarlate, that is to say a scarlet dragon, frémit et s'anime, shakes and is animated, like is moving. Whereas in the English edition, it says rustles by, borne on winds of doom, porté par les vents du destin. Now, there's not actually a word like doom does not exact. There's no word like that in French, but instead we have destin, which doubles over as the word for doom. Destin being destiny, but also doom, as said. And dans leur armure étincelante, yeah, like the next notable section, I would argue, is the transpercé par les lances meurtrières, where the thrusting lances break. And in the French edition, I get more the impression that the knights themselves were killed by lances. Whereas in the English edition, in heaps, the shining horsemen lie where the thrusting lances break. Now, I don't get the impression that the lances were used to break the knights. So there is that contrast between the two. That said, everything else is generally the same, but I just thought it's worth comparing and contrasting French and English with each other. Maybe just because I'm French and I love reveling in my native language. And I think that there is knowledge and symbolism to derive from this. And there's the fact that the French edition is a great translation. Much as I love I like the original English, obviously, because it's Howard's own pen. Same with Tolkien. Like the Tolkien French translation is good, not great. And it's very stilted, the style of writing. And so when reading am I breaking up right now? Okay, I hope my internet stabilizes. Okay, it doesn't seem to be. Anyways, let's see if I can't. Okay, I want to actually share one thing. Also, the French translation comes with this beautiful image right here. Okay, good. You can hear me fine. But yeah, the French translation of Hour of the Dragon, L'Heure du Dragon, is very poetic. Like when I'm reading it, it almost rhymes. Like almost every sentence rhymes, and there's a musical quality to it. So that the translation works great. And it almost feels like a Lord of the Rings type book rather than anything that vaguely resembles sword and sorcery. This is a contrast to the Tolkien Lord of the Rings French translation, which reads very stilted and shakily to an extent. So while I do understand why some might, like in English, I find Tolkien has a musical quality. when it comes to his Lord of the Rings and his Silmarillion. Oh, Silmarillion especially. But Hour of the Dragon in French has a musical quality that's Tolkienian. It reads like a Tolkienian story rather than, I find, a sword and sorcery story. So that's rather interesting. I'm just going to try something. Maybe this will improve my my connection here. Okay, I think it is. I'm just worried about my connection because I don't really want. Well, this is supposed to be over analyzing, and the audio is very important. Anyways, let's try throwing in my copy of Hour of the Dragon. So yeah, I'm going to do a bit of comparison and contrasting, and hopefully we'll all learn something, and hope people don't mind learning a little French along the way, or having some commentary about the French edition thrown in here and there, which, looking at the French edition, I'm just going to quickly check something, which is to say the, let's see, I'm actually just taking a look at something. All right, so I've got about 90 pages left to the book in French. So my hope is that maybe I'll be able to finish it either for the last stream, but if not, I intend to probably do a separate review for the French edition, in English, of course, for you all. And I'm considering, well, doing a French review on maybe, I don't know, elsewhere on Instagram or something, or on a French channel or something that I have. Anyways, let's get started again. The long tapers flickered, sending the black shadows wavering along the walls, and the velvet tapestries rippled. So, yeah. We obviously know through this, and I'm just going to check something real quick. But we obviously know, for one thing, that computer's not working very well. Okay. Let's see. Now, black shadows, you'd expect shadows to be black. Like, I don't think there's any other kind. So this is just Howard reinforcing mood here. The long tapers, which tapers are a kind of candle. And you have sending the black shadows wavering along the walls. And the velvet tapestries rippled. Now, them rippling like that makes it sound like water. No PhD coyote. Oops. Trying really windy here. And the internet is misbehaving. Oh, I'm sorry. My internet's not great either. No PhD coyote. So, yeah, I totally get it. It's why I had to switch my camera off. But I'm just glad to have you, even if you're only here for a few minutes. And, like, hey, I understand Gola's at work, so if he has to duck out, I don't mind. So I'm just flattered people are even taking 5 minutes to join in on the stream. So, yeah. Now, velvet itself is apparently deriving from villus. Well, there's the velutus in Latin. That's a late Latin word that derives from villus, an earlier Latin word. And you have velvet that's a symbol of power and wealth, and obviously. And here the rippling makes it seem like water, as said. What it reminds me of is kind of the idea of the black water into which Imhotep fell into at the end of the Mummy movie from 1999. So this I think is very powerful imagery. And tapestries were very common in the medieval period. Now, as a writer, I'd like description of the tapestries, like what are they tapestries of? Because oftentimes there was a lot of beautiful imagery on them. The Bayeux tapestry is a common, or at least a popular example of a tapisserie from the medieval period. That one depicts Guillaume's conquest of England from 1066. But that aside, far be it for me to question Howard's creative decisions. But what's really creepy in this opening paragraph is, yet there was no wind in the chamber. Yeah, so no wind, and yet the tapestries ripple. That's creepy. What I love about this opening chapter is that Howard, the mythology writer and the action writer, is absent. Howard, the horror writer, is present and on full display. And so what you have is a very creepy, atmosphere that's being set throughout this entire thing. Oh, and we have my good friend Gola, who's got some great commentary. I always liked how Howard used basic words to describe things like black, dark, red, green, and such. Yeah, the interesting thing in contrast between Howard and, say, Tolkien is that Tolkien uses very advanced, in some cases, English, I think, and at the same time combines them with basic English. But in a way, Tolkien had a talent for accessing English words and a vocabulary that no one else historically has ever had and will ever have. And so he's a writer all to himself, at least in regards to vocabulary. For Howard, there are times when you could see an almost similar level of skill with vocabulary. But on the other hand, it's sometimes not quite as grandiose, but it's certainly as refined as that of Walter Scott, who had a fantastic vocabulary. Seriously, read Ivanhoe or any other work by Walter Scott. And the thing is, the truth is, Howard had an incredible vocabulary on par with the finest of Victorian writers. He wrote in a more Victorian style, I find. But at the same time, he kept it simple at times so that it's easily read to a large extent. And yet, there's a sense of mastery of the prose and of the words and of the vocabulary that I would argue leaves you in no doubt that Howard was perhaps the only man who could rival Tolkien to some extent, or at least come close. As anyone who's read the Silmarillion and its attendant tales could tell, Tolkien's kind of a writer all onto himself in terms of mythology and imagery. That said, Howard is someone who gives him a good run for his money. He was a master of keeping things basic. I think at first for the short story poems. Yeah, definitely. I think, though, that though he kept it very basic, the tales he tells eventually are of an advanced and complex nature. Like, he's creating, well, Howard once claimed he was creating sagas in the mold of the Norse sagas or of Beowulf. But arguably, he's creating a mythology as rich and deep as that of Middle-earth. So And he's doing it without being the godlike linguist that Tolkien is. So, and yet he is still a talented linguist in his own right. So, yeah, I really, really do appreciate and respect Howard, though I came to him after, well, when I was already a Tolkien fan. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that's a regular occurrence or journey for a lot of people, but like I said, I read Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion. I came in biased towards Tolkien, but I've quickly come to appreciate Howard because honestly, Howard is a master craft writer. And honestly, it's such a shame he passed when he did. But anyway, it would have been great to see more stories from him and for him to deepen his mythology. And all right, so 4 men stood about the ebony table on which lay the green sarcophagus that gleamed like carven jade. Now, that said, 4 men, are 4 villains. Now, what's interesting is that numerologically, 4 is a sacred number in biblical text. And this is where I just think it's worth noting that this number recurs again and again and again in the Bible. And I think also in Greek mythology. I could be wrong, but I believe I've seen it brought up there as well. I know number 3 also comes up time and again in Greek mythology and in Christianity. So, yeah, we have here the number 4, which is, as said, an important number. Probably the most important number in human history. We then get stood about the ebony table. Obviously, the table's black. So what's interesting here is that he doesn't use the same word. For example, you have black and shadows. These both signal darkness. And then what he ends up doing is using ebony because he's already used black. This is something a lot of writers do. So, you use black at the beginning of the paragraph. Later, you can't reuse it. You need to use the synonym, which Howard does. This is a very basic writing technique. But what's fascinating about Howard is that he does later reuse black with the black handle here. And on top of that, what he also did was, and even black trees here, he uses repetition in the Mark Twainian style. Mark Twain sometimes did that. It's not a popular thing for writers. Very few writers would take this risk because you risk making the text feel redundant or dull. But that's an impossibility with Howard. That being said, he also puts himself in a straitjacket with shadows because this is also black. Now, I know it's weird that I'm commenting this, but I'm also a writer, so I look at this from the point of view of also a bit of a novelist. So it's fascinating to me that he puts himself in a straitjacket right here, but he defies the straitjacket and just comes at it with 3 references to black. But there's also the hidden 4th with ebony. So he seems like he's following traditional literary norm, and then he defies it and just decides he's gonna do what he wants anyways. So yeah, I just think that's a little interesting. As for green, the color of green, of course, symbolizes eternity and fertility. So here, this is obviously signaling that it's a sarcophagus. So it's a box, a coffin for containing the remains of the dead. So, death is pretty eternal. But on the other hand, by having a color of fertility in life attached to death, this is very Egyptian to an extent, but the Egyptians, I think, went more of gold and various other colors. But green specifically, this seems to signal that he will live again in a way, which he will. But then, it gleams like a carven jade. Now, for jade, it is a symbolism, well, or at least associated with nobility and wealth, but it's also a protector of generations, living and dead. So that right there shows jade to be something of a sacred stone of sorts, and an association with both the living and the dead, which is fitting for what's going to happen, and for Xaltotun, because he ends up living and dead, and yet neither, in a way. He's undead. And another title for jade is Gem Supreme and the Jewel of Heaven. So, yeah. Now, I wouldn't exactly associate Xaltotun's coffin with heaven, but Gem Supreme is very fitting considering what's going to be laid within his grasp, and is also very fitting for just how supreme Xaltotun reigns over everyone throughout the story, as his shadow is one that casts a pall over the whole story. As for Jewel of Heaven, well, Jewel of the Underworld, one could say, but heaven's not supposed to just simply be it's the positive underworld. It's where the good people go. Now, that said, I guess one could, well, the heart of Ahriman is pretty, well, I'll get to that later. But anyways, the Jewel of Heaven is also something that, I don't know. I think, but four conspirators seems to be a thing. There are four conspirators in Dune Messiah as well. Yep. And I'm not familiar with that story. I believe you're referring to Dune series, correct? Now, Dune is a series that, from what I was told, was very well written. I'll have to read it at some point. I know it's very weird that I've read some Homer and Virgil, and I've read some medieval lit, but I've never read Dune. I'm not very well read for science fiction, in all honesty. So I'll have to be sure to correct that in regards to Dune, as I've been told a lot of positive things about it. Let me see. Now, in the upraised right hand of each man, a curious black candle burnt with a weird greenish light. Okay, so upraised right hand. Right hand is the hand of good, right being associated with godliness, left with the devil in medieval folklore and thinking. I know it's very peculiar, but it is the way it is. I don't fully understand why they ended up reaching this conclusion. I think it has to do with some sort of story about how Cain may have slain Abel in the Bible with his left hand or something. But I wouldn't put any money on that bet. But either way, now you have a black candle. That's obviously symbolizing, death. And there's something otherworldly about the idea of a black candle burning in this manner and in this kind of scene. But then again, this entire scene feels very eldritch and otherworldly and horrifying. But anyways, with a weird greenish light. Now, for weird, the interesting thing about the word weird is that the root term, I believe, had it as WYRD. So that the word weird comes to an extent from Shakespeare with the three weird sisters. And the weird sisters were the ones who predicted that Macbeth, in the play of Macbeth, would become king, or Ardri, that is to say, High King of Scotland or of Alba. But the weird sisters end up corrupting Macbeth and turning him into a perverted shadow of his former self, so that he goes from a very magnificent figure into a shadow king archetype. Actual history was a heroic man and an incredibly fascinating figure, one whom was worshipped by the Scots. So that what ended up happening was that you had Shakespeare doing a bit of an act of subversion towards this beloved icon of Scotland. And from what I understand, I'm not a Scotsman, and I've never had the pleasure and privilege of traveling through the land of the free, but I believe that Macbeth is still, in some parts, revered as a good and almost saintly king. So this is something that was a case of England versus Scotland to an extent. But on the other hand, it was a play meant to appeal to James VI of Scotland, who had a bit of an issue with witches and who ended up being of the line of a lineage believed to have been descended from Banquo, who was Macbeth's rival. So, of course, this is also a bit of a political act to suck up to the king. So, yeah, this is a interesting word. Weird is an interesting word with a very interesting history connected to what I think is one of Shakespeare's best plays. I love that play. Seriously, read it. You can't go wrong with Shakespeare, I think. But anyways, weird is an appropriate word for what's happening and for Xaltotun as a figure and as a character. While Akivasha, I think, is very similar to the Weird Sisters in some ways in how creepy and wicked she is, Xaltotun behaves a bit more like them over the course of the story. And the greenish light, I think that's pretty creepy. Just because the flames shouldn't have a greenish tint to them, but they do. Outside was night and a lost wind moaning among the black trees. Now this is the second time wind is used. I probably would have used the word breeze, but Howard, now I'm not actually saying that to hold myself as superior. No, I think Howard was obviously a better writer than me. So I find his word choices interesting, and I think it's worth learning from the master, so to speak. And just it just exacerbates my fascination with Howard here. Outside was night, so we know the time of day. This is what he's doing here, because we didn't previously know what time it was, though we probably could have hazarded a guess that it's night. But he hammers the point home here. And a lost wind moaning. Now, the wind is said to moan in Macbeth at the beginning. I believe it's the Weird Sisters who state this fact. So I think here this is a second reference to those Weird Sisters and to Macbeth. And Howard was a massive Shakespeare fan. And I think one of his favorite plays was Julius Caesar, but he's obviously here quite taken with Macbeth. And reading some of Howard's letters, he makes it very clear that when he's writing, he is looking to Shakespeare or getting ideas from Shakespeare, because he'd read Shakespeare and be inspired by what he read for some of his stories. And then he'd transmogrify, or I guess metamorphosize the idea or like the basic scene or theme in the Shakespeare play, be it Julius Caesar, be it Richard III or something, and transfer it over to his own story, but it'd be completely reinterpreted and turned into something even more grandiose, so that it becomes mythological and titanic in size and in scope and glory, I would argue. So you have here a lot of great ideas. Okay, I'm just going to check the chat to see if I missed anything. Okay, cool. I haven't. I'm just going to take a quick swig of water. Hopefully I'm not too dull right now. as it is, I don't have a partner for this stream to bounce off of. And I think that adds some measure of difficulty to me. And I just checked. Oh, wow, we have someone over on Twitch who's now listening in. That's great. I don't have many followers over on Twitch, so I'm always glad to find out that people are watching there. And I'm going to be honest, I honestly have no idea how to grow my Twitch channel. So, yeah. And I've obviously got some people watching on Brothers Crin, which, yay. I honestly do appreciate that main channel of mine. Although I do wish I was, I wish I had already finished Spring Dawning and moved to Legend of Huma there. And that I had a bit more steady flow of Zelda, Warcraft, Tolkien, and Howard content for that channel. But as it is, I've got all these side channels I'm trying to catch up. But anyways, for Brothers Aborian, if you're watching it through there, anyway, at any point, kudos to you. And if you aren't already, just please subscribe. We are trying to grow that channel. It'd be nice to reach 130 subs soon. I also noticed real quick that Stygian Dogs has also gotten stuck at 378 or so. So this is something that's happening across the board to a few Conan fans. Anyways, on a more positive and fun note, so among the black trees. Now, the wind moaning among the top of trees, this is a Shakespeare Macbeth reference as well. So this part's also a reference to that. I know I'm pointing out a lot of Shakespeare stuff, but like I said, I read Howard and I'm reminded of Shakespeare to an extent because Howard's directly referencing Shakespeare, who was, I think, kind of his hero, just as Shakespeare was Tolkien's. So what you have here is a very, very fascinating literary dialogue Howard is having. And Tolkien did much the same thing. When Fanghorn, I hope I pronounced that right, ends up attacking Saruman's tower, what you have is Tolkien in dialogue with Shakespeare. And Tolkien always felt that the trees themselves should have come alive and attacked Macbeth's castle. But the problem is that Macbeth was thinking in historic terms, not in a kind of Greek mythological or Norse mythological sense, like Tolkien was. But Tolkien thought it would be funner if the trees came alive and attacked, rather than people cutting up branches and parts of trees and carrying it along. Now, that said, what Howard is doing is much the same as Tolkien, except he's having a different kind of dialogue with Shakespeare. And Howard's also coming at this from a very different perspective to an extent, because Tolkien was someone who, while having some German in him, was very, very much purely English. He was very Anglo-Saxon. He was Anglo-Saxon. Howard, while coming from, in terms of literary heritage, from, to an extent, the same kind of culture in a way. Like, what I mean is Anglo-Saxon English kind of background. Howard also has some connection to Irishness. And of course, Texas, of course, because he's the premier writer of all times of Texas. But Howard is of Irish descent. So he's looking at Shakespeare and other stories through the lens of a Celtic heritage. So that's also something worth taking notice of, as his historic background was something that Howard was very proud of, much as Tolkien was of his own. But Howard is very conscious of the weight of history behind him and is writing with that in mind. So, yeah, he's looking at this in a more Celtic light, which I've read a little bit of Celtic literature, and there can be a atmospheric horror and creepy vibe to some Irish stories and Scottish stories. So this opening part of the Long Tapers up to the Black Trees. Now, Shakespeare got a very creepy set of scenes into his Macbeth play and in some of his others, to be quite honest. But Howard, the way this writes is very much Celtic, I think, in some ways, or at least the feel of it is of Celtic horror in a way. And the Celtic people, be they of Ireland, Scotland, or France, or something, as the French are a kind of Celtic people, there's a certain sense to their stories. They feel, in some ways, different from, say, those of the English, which I find that English stories tend to read and feel more like those of Scandinavia. And I say that with a great deal of affection for Scandinavian literature. So I don't know, maybe that's why I read a lot of translated editions of English lit, because I really love, well, most French people are Anglophiles. So yeah, but even so, when you read a French edition of a English book, there's always a dab more Celticness to it because it's been translated into French, and French literature feels a lot more Celtic than English does, I think. But there's a weird metamorphosis that goes through. So on that said, I do have a fondness for Irish and Scottish lit as well. But yeah, anyways, enough yammering on about something that's not exactly relevant. Let's see. Oh, we have Mark. Hello, Mark. Very glad to have you. Oh, wow. We're at 6 people in the observing the stream. Oh, thank you. And I do hope people will remember to smash that like and whatnot and share the stream around if they're having enough fun. Hour of the Dragon. Wasn't it Hour of the Wolf? Wait, no. That is another universe. Yeah, I believe that would be Game of Thrones. I think Martin based the idea of the Hour of the Wolf or something like that off of Howard's Hour of the Dragon idea, I think. But I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure how much of a fan Martin is of Howard. The winds were moaning in the night around Erebor when Smaug attacked the Lonely Mountain. Yep, that's a direct reference to Shakespeare as well by Tolkien. And I'm just going to comment that might be Tolkien also entering into dialogue with Shakespeare. I wonder if maybe I should also do an over-analyzing The Hobbit. Once all the Hobbit videos are fully transferred to my brother's Arda channel. If I were to do that, I wonder. Now that's something that I've got a few friends who've seen those videos and they've been asking for more Hobbit stuff. So maybe I should do that. Anyways, but yeah, the Smaug thing, that's a reference, I think, to the Weird Sisters part with the moaning wind going along the top of the trees. Let's see. If my Shakespeare copy had not already been put away, I probably would drag it out. Actually, one second. I'm going to just see if I can't find the Act 1 part. Whoops, a bunch of YouTube videos pop up. I think here it is. It'll just need a moment to load. All right, so I saw George R.R. Okay. I'm not as knowledgeable of him and his works, although I've done, I think, a few videos of his books. The thing about George R. R. Martin is he has really good mastery of prose for the most part, but he's not really my cup of tea. And although that said, I also do Game of Thrones content because I like some of the world building, and I do like doing collabs with Jasper Lane, and I'd like to someday do a collab or two with Robert from Indie Geek. Let's see. The Celts were all over Central Europe as well. Yeah, they were. They really were. Although they were kind of pushed back by the Avars, the Magyars, and other Slavic invasions and other kind of Germanic tribes. They were pushed further west and ultimately, arguably, forced to assimilate or to cross the channel into England and whatnot. And eventually were pushed back into corners. And notable examples of Celtic people of the British Isles are the Cornwallians or the Cornish, the Welsh, obviously, the Scots, and over on the Emerald Isle, you have Ireland. And of course, in France, they kind of fused with the Latin culture of the Romans and with the Frank, who were a German tribe. But the Frank kind of assimilated to the local culture as well. So you had a weird fusion that happened. But those who tried to preserve pure Celtic culture ended up pushed into Bretagne, which is a peninsula in the western part of France. And there's also a lot of the Breton tribes of England that crossed the channel in turn during the Anglo-Saxon conquest of the 5th and 6th century, I believe. So, and fused with the Bretagne tribes there. All right, so Martin was on a talk show, said he was more into Conan when he first read Lord of the Rings. He was surprised at it starting with a party. Oh, okay. Well, I guess if you've read Hour of the Dragon before Lord of the Rings, you'd be a little surprised that the book that's so similar to Hour of the Dragon starts with the total opposite of how Hour of the Dragon starts. So, and Lord of the Rings has some great creepy stuff in it. I'd argue it almost doubles over as a horror novel at a few points. Same with the Silmarillion, and yet it starts with a party, which is, I think, really funny and cool. But yeah, Martin, I don't blame him for kind of going, well, that's weird. Given, yeah. I haven't read Game of Thrones, just watch the show. Oh, okay. I think that's the case for most people. Okay, now for Macbeth, let's see. Let's see. Okay, I gotta look through Act 1, Scene 2. I thought it was around Act 1, Scene 1 or Scene 2. It's been a while since I read the play. Let's see. I know there's a reference to moaning air. And let me see. Okay, well, anyways, next time I'll have to come equipped with that. Oh, and we have Stephanie Frederick. You're always welcome. Madame, it's a pleasure to have you here. Hope you're doing well. This is currently a mega geeky Howard stream as I overanalyze for the first time Hour of the Dragon. I really got to get back to overanalyzing Tolkien. But I can't do overanalyzing Silmarillion anymore without Dan present. It just wouldn't be respectful or polite towards him, as he likes that series. So I may end up doing overanalyzing Hobbit soon, though. Now that I think about it. And maybe the occasional Lord of the Rings. Maybe I should do an overanalyzing Lord of the Rings. I like that idea. Anyways, inside the chamber was tense silence and the wavering of the shadows, while four pairs of eyes, burning with intensity, were fixed on the long green case across which cryptic hieroglyphics writhed as if lent life and movement by the unsteady light. So, okay. This is a really long sentence, actually. And it's the sort of sentence I'd want to break up, but Howard does do long sentences quite a lot, but it works for him. Although I've noticed Tolkien does long sentences a lot as well. So, let's see. Burning with intensity, we're fixed on the long green case. Once again, we have green. Howard's really using this color, the color of eternity. But because of the way you have a weird greenish light, but also a green sarcophagus, he's turned what is a kind of comforting color into a very creepy color. And he keeps hammering the point home about it. As for cryptic hieroglyphics, hieroglyphs are obviously associated with ancient Egypt by most, especially at that time, as Egyptology was something that was an Egyptian mania was really taking off. So that's something. And you have, of course, came across case across which cryptic hieroglyphs writhed. Now, the way he's talking, it's as though the hieroglyphs have come to life. What it reminds me of is also the Prince of Egypt, wherein you have the hieroglyphs that seem to kind of animate, and you have a lot of scenes with animated hieroglyphics. What I find, I remember being, I think I was like 7 years old when I saw that movie. I had nightmares for like 2-3 weeks, if I'm being honest, because of some of those scenes. I don't know if it's just because I was kind of cowardly as a child, but it is something that I found creepy. And I think Howard kind of predicted that kind of creepy animation in a way by a couple of decades. Or at least he had the idea of such animation being, or such imagery could be used in a creepy manner. Or I don't know, like I think he's employing a bit of an, it would be uncanny to see hieroglyphs move, is my point. And he's realizing that and turning it into something very horrific, as if lent life and movement by the unsteady light. So as we all know, the light is very unsteady, but the color is also unsteady, arguably, because it's on black candles, but they have a green light. So the color is unsteady as well, and uncanny, arguably. So his use of the word unsteady makes it seem as though the light on these candles, this candlelight, is shaking. Now, I'm not sure quite yet whether or not the men's hands are shaking. Although, if I was a film director, or which I'm not, I have more experience with animation. So if I was animating a scene, I'd probably have their right hands shaking in some cases. Probably in the case of Tarascus, in particular, as he later has a lot of doubts regarding the revival of Xaltotun. And this could be used to hint at what's to come, characterization-wise. That said, the man at the foot of the sarcophagus leaned over it and moved his candle as if he were writing with a pen, inscribing a mystic symbol in the air. So, yeah, we have Orestes standing at the foot of the sarcophagus. Orestes is the main priest. He's a former priest of Mitra, Mitra being a kind of Judeo-Christian style god in the Hyborian Age mythology, and he but he fell from grace, so to speak, and ends up worshiping darker gods because he hungered for knowledge and power. So and Orestes ends up being the main culprit responsible for the revival of the Dark Lord Xaltotun. Now, leaned over it and moved his candle as if he were writing with a pen, which is very weird. And, well, it's reminiscent of the fact that in olden times, wax was used for the sealing of letters and whatnot. So that's what it's also reminiscent of. Inscribing a magic symbol in the air. Then he set down the candle and its black gold stick at the foot of the case. Gold is also associated with eternity, as it is the purest metal, arguably, and very, very precious. As anyone who has a fascination with metallurgy knows, and even with symbolism regarding such things. So, yeah, I'm just going to quickly check the chat. Oh, okay. Okay, I'll start at the top. I missed some comments. Hang in there. Hope you're both well, brothers. I'm well enough. Better than I was a few days ago. And Dan's fairly well, although he's visiting some friends right now, at least via Discord. Let's see. I have a soft spot for that movie, for Prince of Egypt. It's a great film. I don't watch it very often because, well, I don't know. It's just not a film I overwatch, but it is a great film. I have a weird fondness for Joseph, King of Dreams. I like that movie better for some reason. I don't know why. But Prince of Egypt is probably one of the greatest animated films of all times, objectively. So, yeah, like, I just find it very creepy with the animated hieroglyphs. Although arguably it has one of my favorite songs of all times, In Heaven's Eyes. I find it's a go-to song for when I'm depressed. And I like to try to look at myself and my life through other eyes than my own. Otherwise, I get very depressed. I'm watching on the Brothers Crin. It says this was 8 hours ago. Oh, that's weird. Okay. 8 hours ago. Bizarre. Anyways, yeah, so I guess, Mark's watching it over on Brothers Hyborian. Yeah, sorry if this is confusing for people to be with the different channels. I'm just streaming on both channels because I wanted to make some Howard talk content for Brothers Crin. And of course, because it's Howard related, I feel I have to stream on Brothers Hyborian to beef up that channel a little more. And I intend to do the same for Brothers Arda, Brothers Hyrule, and Brothers Azeroth for those respective mythoses. But of course, Brothers Crin is still the main channel. Anyways, the question is, does that priest do a music number like High Priest Jethro in the Prince of Egypt? Oh, God. Oh, God. Well, I think that's the point. No, Orestes does not do a music number. No, he doesn't. I wish. It'd be very Celtic of him. According to Don Bluth, he knew some people in Ireland who'd just break into song when he'd see them. And so breaking into song is a common thing in Ireland. And apparently, I've listened to Irish or Celtic Catholic masses just out of curiosity, online, and they have some beautiful music. It's mostly musical uh, uh, church sessions, and weirdly, it's like certain African American churches where there's a lot of music involved, and like that of African Americans, it's very beautiful, very beautiful music. But Gaelic is a very, very beautiful language. So it'd be nice if Orestes broke into song, but maybe it's proof of his evil that he doesn't. Um, because, if, but maybe Hadrathas, I think it is, the high priest of Asura, should have broken into song. And hey, if it was an animated flick, we definitely need some music numbers. I definitely want Hadrathas to break into song. Maybe even Albiona should break into song. But I don't know if there will ever be an animated flick like that. But on the other hand, this is a sort of mythological universe where I'd say it should be portrayed with a hard R or something, as far as an animated feature-length film or TV series. As well, contrary to what some think, Western animation, I think, can be as, if it was given half the chance, it could outstrip or do just as great as anime does at depicting darker stories or more mature stories or different kinds of stories. But it's not been given half the chance or the funding that anime has. But that's also in part because eventually, under Abe Shinzo, the Shadow Shogun, Prime Minister of Japan, anime got a lot of, well, it was considered soft power by Japan, and so it got a lot of political and economic support and financial support to an extent. Whereas in the West, a lot of animation died out, lack of funding and everything. And not everyone had the deep pockets of the Walt Disney Company, who eventually turned away from 2D in favor of 3D, which I find arguably doesn't look as good. Although I'm not criticizing Shrek or Tangled or something. I think those are gorgeous films. I love those ones. Anyways, back on topic. Our sadly anti-musical high priest ends up, all right, now he's mumbling some formula unintelligible to his companions. Now, this is where it's interesting. To some of us, like, Latin is unintelligible. And like, so, the Latin Mass was originally a thing, but were it to ever make a comeback in some places, I imagine most people wouldn't understand it. Not everyone was Tolkien who could. But what's interesting is that this is, I think, reminiscent of that, but on the other hand, in a darker way. Although arguably the language used by Orestes is older than Latin in universe, due to the frame narrative being that the Hyborian Age is from a pre-cataclysmic period before the last ice age. And arguably only those trained in the Acheronian rites or the Stygian rites of Set might understand this sort of language, this sort of formula, as what he's doing is very, very evil, wicked work. He thrust a broad white hand into his fur-trimmed robe. Yeah. Now, fur gives the impression of a wild or savage piece of clothing, but also a certain, in our modern context, wealth, as fur coats and whatnot are something only really rich people have. But in ancient times, this was pretty much more common. And so it gives a much more primordial world and sense of fashion, I guess. When he brought it forth again, it was as if he cupped in his palm a ball of living fire. The other three drew in their breath sharply, and the dark, powerful man who stood at the head of the sarcophagus whispered, "The heart of Ahriman." Now, we are all of us familiar with the One Ring to rule them all, the One Ring of Sauron. The heart of Ahriman is going to play a similar role in The Hour of the Dragon. As is later revealed in this excellent novel, the heart of Ahriman seems to have a corruptive influence on people and seems to have a dark side to it. There is it is a force of life in a way, and it is a force of good to an extent in that it can cast aside the undead. It can bring people back from the dead if used correctly. And the way it's used with Xaltotun, from what I can understand, is not exactly the correct way, so he ends up undead, or a facsimile of the wicked high priest that was Xaltotun. But ultimately, there's something uncanny about the heart of Ahriman. Now, it's stated later that if it were cast into the ocean, it would just find its way back to the shore. And we see it drive at least one guy kind of cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, kind of insane. So that in a way, it has a corruptive, addictive feel to it, much like the One Ring. Now, arguably, Tolkien goes into more detail about the corruptive power of the One Ring through Golem. As Golem as a character is basically a showing of what can happen if you hold on to the One Ring for too long. That said, the heart of Ahriman doesn't seem, it's not shown to do that per se, but within a few seconds, it corrupts one warrior in, I think it's Argus? Anyways, it corrupts someone almost immediately. As soon as he sets eyes on it, he's consumed by greed and longing for it. So for some, it seems to be corruptive almost immediately for them. And Conan himself seems drawn to it and fascinated by it. But Conan, while he does end up laying claim to it later in the story, spoilers alert, he is able to give it over to others at the end, and for them to use for good and to ultimately seal it away, because it is a powerful force of nature that is beyond man's ken, so that it needs to be set aside where no one will lay claim to it, and where it'll be protected by the god Mitra in his hidden shrine, I believe, or at least below. It's placed below in a hidden sanctum below a temple. But as said, this is a very corruptive force operating as a MacGuffin that's akin to the One Ring, and it serves to corrupt people, and it just drives men insane at various points. We have Mark cracking wise again. Maybe a song like Arsenic Cake from Asterix and Cleopatra then. I've not seen that yet. I'm gonna have to see that. There's a bunch of Asterix stories or movies I want to watch, in particular the newest one in French. But the trouble is that I've not found the time to watch the movie yet. We're probably gonna have to do a review of that. Maybe I should just do that as a review for Brothers Cringe, just for fun. Although, yeah, we'll see. Anyways, giving rings away, that is Círdan with Narya, or Finrod with his ring to Barahir. Yeah. Good eye there. I think the context in a way is different, but I also think that it is similar in a way, as in the case of Círdan with Narya, it is done for the same reason Conan gives the heart of Ahriman to Hadrathas and to Zalada. He gives it over to them, knowing that they are wiser than he in magical arts. I say magical, but like, yeah. With Howard, it's complicated, but he gives it over to them for them to make use of it to get rid of Xaltotun, because doing battle on the mystic metaphysical planes is beyond him. He is not a priest or a mage of any kind. So that in hindsight, I guess there is something akin, like a similarity there between Conan and Círdan in that regard. I've never thought about it that way. That being said, as to the Finrod with his ring to Bara here, I'm not sure there's really any kind of similar story like this in the Legendarium of Howard. So, I'm gonna have to come back to this one at some point. Anyways, let's see. The other three drew in their breath sharply. Yeah, okay. Let's see. You have somewhere a dog began howling dolefully. Aww. And a stealthy step padded outside the barred and bolted door. Now, Howard, interestingly, was a dog lover. He really loved his dog. And the thing is, this is something that the dog basically is reacting the way, I think, like a Greek chorus in a way, like reacting with horror at this dark ritual, so that we're kind of supposed to identify with the dog and kind of be of the same mind as him. The fact that he's able to sense through a bolted and barred door what's being done shows the otherworldly wickedness of this deed, or misdeed, I should say. But none looked aside from the mummy case over which the man in the ermine-trimmed robe was now moving the great flaming jewel. Now, as for the man in question, the ermine... I got to mention Círdan and Finrod in the same comment. That means double points. Yes. Okay. Very true. Very true. That said, what's kind of interesting here is that ermine is something that is a symbol of purity. So we're kind of... Oh, 1 sec. I just have to close the door. The nature of ermine is that it's symbolic of purity. So there's a lot of associations here with priestliness, which in the classic sense a priest was supposed to be pure in some ways. So the trouble here is we have a very corrupted image here. In a way, Orestes, actually a good word to use here, it might be, he's a subversion of how a priest should be. And in a way, he's in a wicked version of Hadrathas, the priest who becomes a good friend of Conan's later in the story. The two are opposites of each other. But that said, the great flaming jewel, while he muttered an incantation that was old when Atlantis sank. Okay, so the incantation actually dates back to the pre-Acheronian Stygian era. Acheron and Stygia being ancient, dark, evil kingdoms akin to Morgoth's kingdom in a way, or no, wait, maybe not Morgoth for Tolkien. It might be better to compare it to Mordor at its peak. But the thing is, one was destroyed, Acheron, and Stygia was not. But that said, Set's initial, well, you basically had at one time the Snake Man who ruled over a good chunk of the earth, along with other beastly creatures. And the Snake Men ended up losing their empire and kingdom as humans rebelled. And that said, I would argue that the incantation must date back to that era, to the Snake Man era, when Set had direct connection to some extent with the earth. So that you have here a bit of a Howardian counter image to Morgoth and his kingdom of Angband. I'm only making the correlation here because there's a lot of Tolkienian fans here in the chat, and I figure I have to kind of be polite and kind of make the comparison and try to keep you all interested. Now, I originally at the beginning of this stream said I'd actually juxtapose the English dialogue here with the French, but maybe that might be something to analyze in a stream next time, and catch up on the French thing and analyze that later. But I'm mostly trying to get to, let me just scroll down. I was hoping to get to Xaltotun's revival. Let's see, I'm about 2 pages away, sort of. The glare of the gem dazzled their eyes so that they could not be sure of what they saw. But with a splintering crash, the carven lid of the sarcophagus burst outward, as if from some irresistible pressure applied from within, and the 4 men, bending eagerly forward, saw the occupant. A huddled, withered, wizened shape with dried brown limbs like dead wood, showing through moldering bandages. Okay, so first off, I'm going to say that I don't know if I'm going to reach as far as I wanted to, but this wizened shape is actually our resident Dark Lord, folk. So this is going to be our Dark Lord for this book. And the dog's throwing the door open again. Anyways, Xaltotun is to Howard's mythology and many stories what Sauron is to the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's Legendarium. So that we'll get to the death, well, how such a powerful figure died next time or something, but I'm going to soldier on and try to get to the part I wanted to end with. But anyways, Xaltotun is a very interesting character, and unlike Sauron, he actually appears on page, so to speak, and has dialogue and whatnot, and he's a very chilling character with great dialogue, and you get a strong sense of someone who's otherworldly, almost demonic in nature. But on the other hand, there is something to be said about the fact that Sauron never appears on page. So anyways, you have "Bring that thing back," muttered the small dark man who stood on the right with a short, sardonic laugh. "It is ready to crumble at a touch. We are fools. Shh." Now, this is this figure saying we are fools. He's stating what he is. So obviously, on some level, one could say psychologically he knows what he did was really, really, really dumb. And that because of this, they're probably not going to survive. Well, they actually don't really survive. Most of them don't. And it's a really, really, really wicked, dumb thing they do. Anyways, it was an urgent hiss of command from the large man who held the jewel. Although he is not actually a king or a very, very wealthy baron, like his co-conspirators are, or later become, Orestes is really the leader of this group. And he is really the guy in charge, the guy with a plan. And he often takes command. He's the most charismatic of these four. Most of these guys, although they're of high rank, are rather more followers, or guys who are very, very self-destructive in some ways. Like, so that they're the sort of people who might get elected, but they quickly run their they're the sort who would run their nation into the ground. If one were to compare them to historic figures who were able to achieve high rank and then just drive things into the ground, one could compare it to Caligula or Nero, or to an extent Louis XV of France. These were figures who were insane and just ran their countries into the ground. But Orestes is someone who's cleverer than that, more brilliant than that. But he's making a foolish mistake in his haste and in his hunger for knowledge and power. Perspiration stood upon his broad white forehead, and his eyes were dilated. He leaned forward, and without touching the thing with his hand, laid on the breast of the mummy the blazing jewel. Then he drew back and watched with fierce intensity, his lips moving in soundless invocation. Now, the heart of Ahriman is the only thing that could defeat Xaltotun. It is his kryptonite, basically. But here's the thing. It is also his one ring in a way. Well, he has another ring, I believe. He has an actual ring, I believe, that works like that. But this is, in effect, something that you're basically handing Sauron his one ring here. That's the problem. And so, arguably, what Howard does is he has the villain. Now, what Tolkien did was, you have Sauron separated from the One Ring, and the whole quest is Sauron trying to get the One Ring back, and the heroes trying to deny him that. What Howard does is he has the villain already get it at the start, which in some ways does raise the stakes quite a bit, because it gives the villain the victory before the battle's even fought. But then the whole thing is about tracking it, getting the object away from him and tracking it down once it's away, in order to get to it before he can get it back. So it does the same quest, but different in a way at the same time. So that, now that said, arguably, while Conan suffers some betrayals of note over in, from a certain infamous merchant he has dealings with, the trouble for Conan is, I would argue, he doesn't suffer the same, you don't get the same kind of betrayals in a way as what you see in Lord of the Rings with Saruman, with Grima Wormtongue, Denethor, although Denethor's is an act of, his betrayal is an act more of despair and whatnot, and that's a different situation entirely. A completely different one, which is its own case. But on the other hand, Orestes could be argued to be Saruman here, although he's of a very different nature and very different motivation. He's a very different character, even though he's the same archetype as Saruman. And I actually think Orestes is just as interesting as Saruman, and just as complex in some ways, as he's initially very loyal to Xaltotun. But weirdly, he's loyal to his other co-conspirators, it seems. But then, his loyalty undergoes development to some extent. And while he's an impulsive guy with this great power that he has, he's not as dumb as others might be. And he's very, in a way, he's very rational and very level-headed. But anyways, I should perhaps at some point do a separate video just for just analyzing Orestes, because I really like him as a character. And there's a lot to analyze. Anyways, it was as if a globe of living fire nickered and burnt on the dead, withered bosom, and breath sucked in, hissing through the clenched teeth of the watchers. Obviously, they're very anxious and apprehensive, for as they watched, an awful transmutation became apparent. The withered shape in the sarcophagus was expanding, was growing, lengthening. Oh, that's another thing I just remembered. The Universal Monster mummy movies had come out around the time of the 30s. This book was written around the time of 1936 or 37. And the thing about the mummy story is that the mummy movies were obviously popular, and arguably Xaltotun's a bit of a nod to them. I'm pretty suspicious that I haven't read it in his letters. I haven't reached that point in his letters yet. But Howard was someone who liked movies, and I think he would have. I have my sneaking suspicions he probably liked the Mummy movie. So, anyways, the bandages burst and fell into brown dust. The shriveled limbs swelled, straightened. Their dusky hue began to fade. Yeah. By Mitra, whispered the tall, yellow-haired man on the left. This would be Valerius. Now, his name means obviously valor, but now what's interesting is that in A Witch Shall Be Born, you have a young hero who is called Valerius, and he seems like a squire almost to Conan. He's very much someone who looks up to and hero worships Conan, and he's the main hero of A Witch Shall Be Born. And in that story, he rescues Conan's lover, Taramis, from her wicked weird sister, like evil, debauched twin sister who's a witch, really a demon in human flesh, called Salome. And so Howard reused the name of a heroic character, but turned him into a almost buffoonish, completely unlikable villain. But at the same time, he later reused the name for a female variant, Valeria, for one of Conan's greatest love interests, who is a pirate, former pirate, turned mercenary, who initially rebuffs Conan's affections, but later comes to become passionately in love with Conan. But Valeria is also interesting because she arguably is, in a way, Howard's Eowyn to an extent. But Valeria herself is a very complicated character, and she's in some ways a more heroic version of Bêlit, Conan's first love, who was also a pirate, with Bêlit having a bit of a darker edge to her. And Valeria, Valeria has a bit of a dark edge too, but Valeria is quite different in a way, and probably the greatest female swordsman or swordswoman of Howard's legendarium, and arguably one of the only characters who comes close to being as great a warrior as Conan. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. She's just devastating as a fighter in Red Nails, so that even Conan is impressed by her and kind of unsure if he, going into a fight, if he were to fight her, not that she'd ever fight him because, love and whatnot, he's not sure he'd come out unscathed, which should say a lot for how brilliant she is as a swordswoman. For the Game of Thrones fans, I would argue Valeria would make guacamole, not just of Jaime, but of Arthur Dane and even Barristan. I think she'd just chop the two of them apart, almost teaming up. She's like a force of laughing chaos. In battle, she does at times burst into laughter and just start chopping everything apart. She's quite the character. I would not want to mess with her. Anyways, again, a trembling finger warned for silence. The hound outside was no longer howling. He whimpered as if with an evil dream. And then that sound, too, died away in silence, in which the yellow-haired man plainly heard the straining of the heavy door, as if something outside pushed powerfully upon it. Arguably, that's the spirit of Xaltotun being torn from the other side, from the underworld, and being dragged into the living realm. And it's also reminiscent, I think, of the 1999 Mummy movie. So I do wonder if maybe there was some inspiration taken from this kind of scenery. You never know with Stephen Sommers. He was very well read, especially in horror stuff. And the thing is, this story of Hour of the Dragon here, there's great imagery here for horror. And the scene I'm referring to is the revival scene of Imhotep in the Mummy movie. Anyways, he half turned, his hand at his sword, but the man in the ermine robe hissed in urgent warning. "Stay! Do not break the chain, and on your life, do not go to the door." So they're forming some sort of chain with their candles held in their right hands, held up. And so they're probably they're basically representing 4 different points here, possibly signifying north, south, east, and west. The 4 directions, or the 4 points of a star or something. I'm not sure. I'm theorizing here. The yellow-haired man shrugged and turned back, and then he stopped, short, staring. In the jade sarcophagus lay a living man, a tall, lusty man, naked, white of skin and dark of hair and beard. He lay motionless, his eyes wide open and blank and unknowing as a newborn babe's. Now, the idea here, I think, thematically, is that he's been reborn. And so there is something, it's like he's come fresh out of the womb, in a way, so that he is almost an innocent, except this is the most evil man in Howard's Legendarium to ever live. He's not coming back with all of his knowledge immediately. It's going to take him a few minutes to realize who and what he is. I know that's a very weird way of depicting a revival event. Like, arguably, when Sauron comes back after the sinking of Numenor, he knows exactly who and what he is. He's a Maiar. Xaltotun is not born a Maiar, but he is born a very peculiar descent. It's hinted that he has some Snake Man in him. And the Snake Man are descendants of Set himself, to an extent. So, in some form. So what you have there is the intermingling of some non-human with human blood to create, I guess you could say, imperial line of Acheron. And Akivasha, the vampiress, has similar qualities of like the glowing eyes in the dark that Xaltotun has. So this is something very distinctive to the upper classes of Acheron and Stygia of old. I mean, like the ancient ones. I don't think they have this quality anymore in Stygia. It's probably been bred out to an extent. On his breast, the great jewel smoldered and sparkled. The man in ermine reeled as if from some letdown of extreme tension. Ishtar. Now, Ishtar is a ancient Mesopotamian goddess, as you all know, goddess of battle and love and beauty. As the archetypal goddess, Ishtar / Freya / Aphrodite, or Venus, have always been associated with battle and love and lust and beauty. So this is, Howard was very familiar with I think, the Epic of Gilgamesh and other traditional Mesopotamian mythological tales depicting Ishtar. And so, yeah, this is him showing off how smart he was. It is Xaltotun. Xaltotun is the Dark Lord. And he lives, Valerius, Tarascus, Amalric. Do you see? Do you see? You doubted me, but I have not failed. We have been close to the open gates of hell this night, and the shapes of darkness have gathered close about us. Aye, they followed him to the very door. Yeah, so you had a lot of shapes of darkness that slammed against the door, I said. But we have brought the great magician back to life. Now, he was a great magician, the greatest, as we find out later. Now, as for the names here, Tarascus sounds a lot like Taramis, a name that Howard gave to a love interest, so it might be a male variant of a name of a very heroic, gentle, unselfish figure. And I believe there was an Amalric in another tale who was a fairly heroic guy. So what Howard has done is he has taken the names of heroic characters and used them for 3 of his main villains of this story, which is very, very clever work. Now, Tarascus ends up as pitiable later as kind of Grima Wormtongue, but there are differences. Amalric is the richest baron in Nemedia, the enemy kingdom to Aquilonia. Aquilonia, well, that's something to get into at a later time. But anyways, Aquilonia is the kingdom Conan is king of. And Amalric is a baron of an area that's on the marches right, but almost between Nemedia and Aquilonia. So a lot of trade goes through there. And Amalric has made himself fat and rich off of that trade. As for Valerius, he is the disgraced heir of the previous lineage that ruled Aquilonia before Conan usurped the throne. But see, that lineage became very cruel and evil as they were corrupted over the course of many centuries, rather akin to the Numenorian royal line, as seen with Ar-Pharazôn. But anyways, the thing is, though, Valerius is kind of wicked like that. But anyways, I'm going to quickly check my chat. Sorry about that. That startled me. I think Dan just went outside or something. Anyways, let's see. Okay, no fresh comments, and I think I'm going to just stop there. As yeah, I made it all the way to the introduction of our beloved Dark Lord, and I think that that's kind of that's far enough. I've gotten almost 2 hours here, and I hope people have had fun. I hope I didn't bore anyone, and people didn't mind me occasionally Google searching a few things real quick, for such as symbolism and whatnot. But I felt that it was important just to add that extra layer of analysis. As well, I thoroughly enjoy that kind of stuff. And the thing about the Dragon Hour streams is that much as I love them, my team ups with the other guys has meant that we do analyze a lot of it text by text, but we don't take 2 hours for just a couple of paragraphs. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with this sort of stream. And because the Hour of the Dragon is an overall book club, well, the Dragon Hour thing is an overall book club of Hour of the Dragon. Whereas this is just me going point by point, analyzing every bit of the Hour of the Dragon. And as said, I'm going to do this to a few of Tolkien's works, and I may down the road also, maybe I should also do it for Legend of Huma. I really like that fantasy story. But anyways, oh, thanks, it was a fun stream. Oh, well, I'm glad. That's really the point of this stream. Let me see if I can get my camera working. Okay, good. Yeah, okay. I'm glad it was fun for you, Gola. I hope it got the juices flowing. If anyone's creative, that'd be kind of the goal. Or it just got you thinking and helps the brain juices, I guess, get flowing. As I find that, for example, listening to Lexi makes me think a lot more and makes me, like, when you feel smarter and you feel like you've learned something from a YouTuber's literary or historic analysis of something, you get to do more in your day and you're able to accomplish more and you feel happier later. And there's always extra layers to analyze to every story of a great writer, such as Tolkien or Howard or Mark Twain or Walter Scott or Alex Dumas or Victor Hugo or Homer or Virgil and whatnot. But anyways, fun and informative. Thanks. Oh, well, I'm glad. No PhD, Coyote. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it off there. I hope folks don't mind. I had considered going all the way to something like 3 hours, but I'm actually a little more tired than I thought I'd be. And I kind of promised I'd read one friend of mine who's an indie fantasy writer. I'd read his book. So I've been slacking off on that. So I got to get some of that done so I can hopefully do some content on that and do a book review of his sword and sorcery book, which is called The Citadel of the Seven Swords. I'm so far enjoying it, so I'm going to give him a shout out in his book, shout out for anyone interested. But anyways, I hope you all have fun, and I hope everyone has a great night. So see you all around, and if you haven't already, do feel free to smash that like and that subscribe button, or share the video with anyone you think might be interested in this sort of thing. Let's try to get both Brothers Conan and Hiborian a little bigger. And, well, as I said, hope everyone has a great day, and Godspeed to you all.